When Dr. Callum Reid scheduled his hospital's annual cardiology gala at the Harrington Centre in downtown Vancouver, he sent invitations to 200 people. Nadia Osei was the 201st. She found out through his assistant, who called on a Tuesday afternoon while Nadia was sitting in her car outside a grocery store, still wearing the hospital scrubs she hadn't had time to change from after her shift at the community clinic in East Van. The assistant's voice was professionally warm in the way of people who deliver complicated news for a living. She said that Dr. Reid had wanted to extend the invitation personally, that it was a fundraiser for the pediatric ward, that Nadia had been instrumental in the cardiology department before her departure, and her presence would mean a great deal. Nadia sat with the phone against her ear and watched a woman push a cart with a wobbling front wheel across the parking lot. She said she would think about it. She did not think about it. She said yes before she put the car in drive. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Maya in her usual starfish position and Eli with one sock on and one sock off, as if he'd lost the argument partway through. Nadia stood in the kitchen and asked herself the honest question. She wrote it on a post-it the way she wrote everything that needed confronting. "Why are you going?" She peeled the note off the counter and threw it away without answering, but she already knew. The Harrington Centre was the kind of venue that made people straighten their spines just by entering it. High ceilings, pale stone floors, the sort of lighting designed to make everyone look like they had slept properly, which Nadia had not. She wore a dress the colour of dark amber, chosen by her sister Priya the week before over video call. Because Priya lived in Toronto and understood that left to herself, Nadia would have appeared in something sensible and forgettable. "You are not sensible tonight," Priya had said. "You are arriving. There's a difference." Nadia had not told Priya why the gala mattered, only that it did. The twins were with Mrs. Ferrer downstairs, who had been watching them since they were 14 months old and treated the arrangement as a personal life mission. Maya had given Nadia a careful once-over before she left and said that the dress was pretty, but the earrings needed to be gold, not silver. Eli had asked if the hospital party had food. Nadia had said yes. He'd said good and returned to his drawing without further ceremony. She thought about those two small faces the entire drive across the bridge. The gala was already full when she arrived. 200 people in evening wear moving through the atrium like a slow, glittering current. The string quartet was playing something tasteful. The bar was doing well. A banner above the east wall read "Hearts in Good Hands." Pediatric Cardiology Fund in the clean font. The hospital communications team used for everything. Nadia took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. She did not need to search the room. She had always known exactly where Callum Reid stood in any space he occupied. It was an irritating quality that had not diminished in 4 years. He was near the far windows with the hospital's chief of staff and a woman in ivory who stood beside him with the particular stillness of someone accustomed to being beside him in photographs. She was blonde and composed and wore a ring that caught the light every time she moved her hand, which was often. His fiancée. Nadia had heard about the engagement through colleagues who mentioned it with the careful neutrality of people checking whether it would land like a bruise it had. She'd thanked them and changed the subject. She was looking at the ring from 40 feet away when Callum turned, not gradually, all at once, the way he always moved, as if he'd made a decision before his body caught up to it. His eyes found hers across the room with an accuracy that still, even after everything, felt unfair. He went very still. Nadia lifted her chin and looked away first. She moved toward the pediatric display along the south wall, where framed photographs of patients and their families were arranged beside clinical data about the unit's outcomes. She had worked in that unit. She had loved that work with a clarity she hadn't felt about many things. Leaving it had been one of the harder choices in a year that had required several. She was reading a caption about a 12-year-old boy who had received a valve repair the previous spring when she heard his voice. Nadia. She turned slowly. Callum Reid was 2 feet away without his fiancée, without the chief of staff, looking at her the way he had no right to look at someone he had not spoken to in 4 years. He was the same. That was the problem. The same dark hair with the early grey at the temples that had appeared when he was 32, and which he had been faintly embarrassed about. The same way of holding himself like he was ready to hear difficult information and intended to handle it correctly. He had always been good at looking like he could be trusted. "Dr. Reid," she said. Something moved through his expression. "You came." "I was invited." "I know." He stopped. "I'm glad you're here." Nadia looked at him with the equanimity she had spent 4 years building like a sea-wall, one careful stone at a time. "Congratulations on the engagement." Callum's gaze dropped briefly to his own hand. "Thank you." "The pediatric fund is a good cause," she said. "I'll make a donation before I leave." "Nadia." "I'm going to find the..." I sent you a letter, he said. She stopped. Last year, in January, I don't know what I wanted. I sent it to your parents' address in Burnaby because I didn't have your current one. Nadia's parents had sold the Burnaby house 3 years ago. They were in Kelowna now, near her mother's sister, in a smaller place, with a garden that had taken 2 seasons to establish. She had not told Callum any of this. He had not been someone she told things to by that point. I didn't receive it, she said. He accepted that with a slight nod, like a man taking a penalty he'd expected. I know you didn't, my mother told me. Nadia looked at him carefully. What did your mother tell you? Before he could answer, a woman's hand appeared on Callum's arm. The fiancée had arrived with the quiet efficiency of someone who tracked exits and arrivals. Up close, she was even more composed, with clever eyes that assessed Nadia in the time it takes to blink, and came to several conclusions simultaneously. Callum, she said, and her voice was pleasant and precise. Dr. Okonkwo is looking for you. Something about the donor list. In a minute. The fiancée, her name was Stephanie Vance, Nadia recalled, corporate law, daughter of a judge, kept her hand on Callum's arm and gave Nadia a smile that was perfectly calibrated. I don't think we've met. I'm Stephanie. Nadia Osei, I'm a former colleague. Of course, Stephanie's smile held exactly. Callum has mentioned you. The way she said it was not unkind. That was almost worse. Congratulations on your engagement, Nadia said again, because it was the right thing to say and she had spent years choosing right things over honest ones when the room required it. Thank you. Stephanie looked at Callum then, a private look that carried information Nadia was not meant to read. I'll let Dr. Okonkwo know you're on your way. She left. Callum watched her go, then turned back to Nadia with the expression of a man who had recently understood something about himself that he would have preferred not to. What did your mother tell you? Nadia asked again. The string quartet shifted into something slower. Around them, the room continued its elegant momentum, and Callum stood in it like a man who had stepped outside of time briefly and couldn't quite get back. She told me you'd called the house, he said, twice, about 2 years ago. Nadia said nothing. She said she told you I wasn't available and to please stop reaching out. A pause. She did not tell me any of this until 3 weeks ago when I told her I'd invited you here tonight. Nadia had made those calls from her kitchen, standing at the counter with Maya and Eli, both asleep in the next room, dials of baby monitor light soft in the dark. She had been 31 years old and utterly alone in a way she had not been prepared for, and she had called the number she still had from 4 years before, telling herself she was calling for the children, which was true, and also for herself, which was also true. The first time a woman had answered who said Callum was unavailable. The second time the same woman had said gently, and with the finality of a door closing, that Callum had moved on, and that whatever Nadia was hoping for would only cause pain for everyone, and that surely she understood. Nadia had understood. She had hung up. She had not called again. That woman who answered, she said now, that was your mother. Callum closed his eyes for 2 seconds, yes. The room pressed gently around them. Someone laughed too loudly near the bar. I should go, Nadia said. Please, he said it quietly, not as a performance, please don't. She studied him. He had not changed, that was still the problem. There are things you should know, she said finally, but not here. The hospital had a small reception room off the main atrium, used for private donor conversations and occasionally for the harder kinds of news. Nadia had delivered bad news in that room before. She knew its pale walls and the way sound sat differently within it, softer and more contained. Callum closed the door behind them. The noise of the gala became a murmur. Nadia set her glass on the side table. She did not sit. I have twins, she said, Maya and Eli. They're 3 years old. Callum did not move. They were born in March 4 years ago, 11 days early. Maya came first. Eli took his time. She heard herself describe it the way she always did, clinically, gently, without drama, and understood that this was a defense she'd built so gradually she'd stopped seeing it as one. They're healthy. They're very bright. Maya has your habit of asking questions before you've finished a sentence. Eli has your eyes. The room went very quiet. Nadia, his voice was barely there. I found out when I was 8 weeks along. I was already 3 months out of my residency at St. Paul's and into my fellowship year. I called you. The number was disconnected. I called the department. I was told by the administrative line that personal contact with Dr. Reed should go through the department head. I sent an email to the address we'd used. It bounced. She kept her voice level the way she kept it level in difficult consults. I wrote a letter to your family's address in West Vancouver. I went to the hospital twice during your scheduled hours and was told each time you were unavailable. The second time, a woman I later learned was your mother came to the lobby herself. She told me you were managing a serious professional period and asked me not to add to it. Callum sat down on the arm of a chair as though his legs had made the decision without him. I went home, Nadia said. I called my sister, I called my mum, I built a life. I didn't know. He looked up at her and she recognized his face in this moment, raw in the way she'd only seen a few times when he had lost a patient unexpectedly and couldn't locate the professional distance fast enough. Nadia, I did not know. I know you didn't. She sat now, across from him. Your mother told me something tonight when I arrived, before I'd even found you in the room. She appeared beside the coat check and told me you hadn't known, and that she'd kept the calls from you because she thought you were choosing a more appropriate path, and that she deeply regretted it. A pause. She said it like she was reading a prepared statement, but she said it. Callum stood and walked to the window. The city beyond the glass was lit and indifferent. I was choosing Stephanie, he said. My mother approved of Stephanie. She approved of Stephanie's family and her career and the fact that her father plays golf with the hospital board chair. He did not say it bitterly, more as a man cataloguing a series of decisions that had seemed reasonable at the time and no longer were. She intercepted your calls. She told you I'd moved on. She managed the situation. Yes. And I let her manage things. He turned. I let my life become the kind of life that could be managed. By the time I noticed I hadn't done anything real in 2 years, I told myself it was maturity. Nadia looked at him. I'm not telling you this to assign blame. I'm telling you because Maya asked me last month why her friend Sophia has a dad who picks her up from daycare and she doesn't. Callum's face changed completely. I told her that some families are shaped differently and that hers had a lot of love in it. She said okay and went back to her drawing. She's 3, she accepted it. Nadia's voice stayed steady. She won't always. He sat back down, closer this time. What did you tell them about me? That they have a father, that we loved each other once, that adults make complicated choices, that they would know more when they were older. She met his eyes. I have never told them they were left. I would not do that to them. Thank you, he said, and it came out rougher than anything else he'd said. They're not a revelation, Callum. They're children. They wake up at 6:15 and they fight about who gets the blue cup, and Eli is currently convinced that if he puts his shoes on the wrong feet, it will make him run faster. They need someone who shows up on Thursday when it's inconvenient. Who knows that Maya needs 5 minutes to herself before she can talk about hard things? Who understands that Eli hides his vegetables under the edge of his plate in a way he believes is invisible? A sound came from Callum that was almost a laugh. Is it? It is not. Nadia's voice softened before she could stop it. The carrots are very visible. He looked at her. May I meet them? That depends. On what? On whether you understand that meeting them is not a gesture, it's not a grand moment. It's the beginning of a very long series of ordinary appearances, and if you miss one without warning, I will not explain you twice. I won't miss one. You can't promise that yet. You don't know what it costs yet. He received that without flinching. Then tell me what it costs. I'll learn. The door opened. Stephanie Vance stood in the frame, and from the expression on her face, Nadia understood that she had done the arithmetic already and arrived at the correct answer. She looked at Callum first, then at Nadia, and then at a point on the wall between them that held the whole situation in it. How long have you known? She asked Callum. About 10 minutes. Stephanie absorbed this with the composure of a woman trained to receive information that restructures entire cases. Twins. Yes. She looked at Nadia, not unkindly, more with the tired recognition of someone who has understood something before she was ready to. You should have been told, she said simply. Yes, Nadia said. Stephanie was quiet for a moment. Then she looked back at Callum, and something in the look was a farewell, though there would be more words later, in better rooms with more privacy. I'm going to find Dr. Okonkwo, she said. You should have the time. She left with the same precision with which she did everything. Callum did not call after her. He looked at his own hands for a moment. I should have built a life that was mine, he said, instead of the one that fit everyone else's measurements. That's not something I can fix for you. I know, he looked up, but I'd like the chance to fix it alongside you, if that's something you'd allow. Nadia thought about her kitchen at 6:15 in the morning. 2 small voices and not enough coffee and the particular exhaustion of being the only adult in a household that needed 2. She thought about Mrs. Farah downstairs with her telenovelas and her infinite patience. She thought about his voice on video call saying you are arriving. There's a difference. She thought about Maya asking about Sophia's father with the matter-of-fact curiosity of a child who trusts the world to make sense eventually. We start with a meeting, she said, somewhere neutral, a park. Not a restaurant, they don't sit still in restaurants yet. All right. You call me to confirm the morning of, not the night before the morning of. They've had things cancelled. I won't have them anticipate and then wait. I'll call the morning of. And Callum. She said his first name carefully, as if she was picking it up after it had been set down for years. If your mother contacts them or attempts to shape what they know about themselves, that conversation ends before it begins. I'll speak to her tonight. I believe you mean that. I do. Nadia stood. She smoothed her dress. The amber caught the light from the overhead fixture, warm and steady. She picked up her glass from the side table. Saturday, she said. Trout Lake Park. 10 in the morning. They've had breakfast by then and they're human. Callum stood too. Saturday 10. They'll want to know your name. Just your name. No explanation. Let them build the rest. She opened the door. The gala resumed, sound and light and the civilized hum of charitable intention. Nadia stepped back into it and walked through the atrium with her glass and her amber dress and the sea wall holding. She did not look back. She did not need to. She left the Harrington Centre at 9:47. Mrs. Ferreira had fallen asleep on the couch with the television on low. Maya was in her starfish position. Eli had located his missing sock at some point and was wearing both now, which Nadia considered a victory. She stood in the dark hallway between their rooms for a moment, listening to the particular silence of children sleeping, which is not silence at all but a soft and breathing presence. She did not tell herself it was going to be simple. She was 34 years old, and she had built a good life from materials that were not what she'd planned, and she knew the difference between hope and fantasy. Hope was something you maintained like a garden, deliberately, with attention to what was actually growing. She went to bed and set her alarm for 6 and did not dream of anything dramatic. Saturday arrived grey and then brightened. Trout Lake was busy by 10, dogs on long leads, families with strollers, a man doing Tai Chi near the south path with the focus of someone who had been doing it for 20 years. Maya wore her red coat. Eli wore his blue one with the yellow stars and his shoes on the correct feet, which Nadia noted but didn't remark on. She had told them that morning over oatmeal that they were going to the park to meet someone. A friend of Mummy's. Maya had asked if the friend had a dog. Eli had asked if the friend had snacks. Nadia had said she wasn't sure about either. Callum Reed was already there when they arrived. He was standing on the path near the play structure in a jacket that was not the right jacket for a park. Too formal, clearly chosen with some anxiety, and he was holding a small paper bag from a bakery on Commercial Drive. He had called at 8:17. I'll be there, 2 words she had appreciated that. He saw them before they saw him. Nadia watched his face from 30 feet away and saw the moment it happened. The moment he saw Maya's eyes and knew them, and then saw Eli's face and understood in the cellular way that bypasses thought entirely. He went very still. Then he took one breath and straightened and waited. Maya spotted him first. She was, as Priya often said, more like a tracking system than a child. She tugged Nadia's hand. Is that him? That's him. Eli squinted. He has a bag. I see that. They approached. Callum crouched when they were close enough, putting himself at eye level with the seriousness of a person who had thought about this and decided it mattered. Hi, he said. I'm Callum. That's not very long, Maya said. It's 2 syllables, Eli said with authority. You're right, Callum said, it is. Maya studied him with the focused attention she brought to all new things. Mummy has a picture of you, she said, in the book in the closet. Nadia had not known Maya had found that she kept her expression neutral through an act of will. Callum looked briefly up at Nadia, then back at Maya. Is it a good one? You look younger, Maya said, and your hair is different. It is different, he agreed. Eli pointed at the paper bag. Is that snacks? Chocolate croissants. I wasn't sure if you liked them. Eli looked at Nadia with the expression of someone receiving confirmation of a worldview. He has snacks, he said. I see that, she said. The 4 of them walked to a bench near the water, and Callum opened the bag with care as if the croissants were something delicate, and Maya declared hers needed more chocolate, and Eli ate his in 4 efficient bites, and then examined Callum's jacket buttons with open professional interest. Those are nice, he said. Thank you, I may have overdressed for a park. Yes, Maya said. Callum smiled. It was the careful smile of a man trying not to want too much at once. They walked the path around the lake. Maya ran ahead and came back. Eli matched Callum's stride with the solemnity of someone conducting a parallel experiment. At the rope bridge by the east end of the play structure, Eli stopped and looked at it, then at Callum. Can you do this one, he said. I think so. It wobbles. I'll manage. Eli went first. Callum followed. The bridge wobbled. Callum held the rope and did not make a performance of steadiness. Eli watched him from the other side. Good, he said, which was, Nadia knew, one of his higher commendations. Maya came back from wherever she'd run to. Did you do the bridge? We did, Callum said. I've done it 40 times, she said. This may have been true. I'm going to do it again. She went. Callum watched her, and Nadia stood beside him and watched too, and for a moment neither of them said anything. She's remarkable, he said quietly. They both are, Nadia said, but I'm biased. You're right. Ely appeared at Nadia's other side and slid his hand into hers without comment. He did this when he was processing something. She held it and waited. Is Callum going to come to the park again, he asked. She looked at Callum. That's something we're going to talk about, sweetheart. Eli nodded. Okay. Callum looked at Nadia over Ely's head. She saw what was in his face and didn't look away from it. He had not earned everything yet. That was the truth, and she intended to keep it in view. But the morning had been real, the bridge had been real, the croissants and the jacket that was too formal, and the way he'd crouched down when they arrived. Those were real, small and unspectacular and real. Love after damage doesn't announce itself, Nadia had learned. It shows up in the morning, which is the hardest time, and it does the ordinary thing. It brings the right snacks. It goes across the wobbling bridge. It does not make speeches. He called the following Tuesday as he said he would. They arranged the next Saturday, and then the one after. He showed up each time with something slightly more appropriate to wear, and by the third week Eli had stopped checking to see if it was him before running over, and Maya had introduced him to her collection of perfect stones she kept in a jar by the front door, and asked which one he would choose if he could keep one. He chose the grey one with a white stripe, which happened to be her second favourite. She told him this gravely, and let him keep it anyway. Callum's mother, Dr. Eleanor Reed, called Nadia on a Wednesday in the third week. She did not beat around it. I owe you an apology, she said. Not a short one, a full one. But I'll begin with this. I was wrong, I knew it when I was doing it, and I continued. I would like the chance to tell you more in person if you'll allow it. Nadia said she would think about it. She did actually think about it this time for 4 days, and then she said yes. It was not a comfortable meeting. Eleanor Reed was a former thoracic surgeon, now retired, who carried herself with the permanent posture of a profession that doesn't allow for uncertainty. She sat across from Nadia in a coffee shop in Kitsilano and said what she had done and did not soften it, and did not ask for forgiveness, only acknowledgement, which Nadia thought was the more honest request. I told myself it was protection, Eleanor said. Callum was fragile in ways he didn't show anyone. The residency, then the fellowship, then his father's illness. I thought he needed consolidation. I thought you were. She stopped. I thought many things that were incorrect. Nadia let the silence sit. I would like to meet Maya and Eli, Eleanor said. When you decide that's appropriate, not before, and not on my schedule. It won't be on your schedule, Nadia said. No, I understand that. And if you ever attempt to manage what they know about their family, or shape how they understand themselves, this conversation will have been the last one. Eleanor's chin came up. Her eyes were dark and direct, the same shade as Callum's. I won't, she said. I have made enough subtractions. I don't intend to make more. It was not forgiveness. It was a beginning of a different arrangement, which was what was available and what Nadia was willing to carry. The hospital gala had a follow-up coverage piece in the Vancouver Health newsletter the following month. It mentioned the pediatric fund donations, which had exceeded the target. It mentioned Dr. Reed's remarks about the cardiac unit's community access work. It mentioned briefly that there had been a meaningful personal announcement made in the weeks following the gala, details of which were kept private by request. Nadia read it on her phone at the kitchen counter while Eli built a tower from cereal boxes and Maya narrated its structural flaws. She set the phone down. Ellie, she said. He looked at her. Callum is coming Saturday. He asked if you'd want to go to the Science Centre. Eli considered this with the seriousness it deserved. The one with the real rocket? The one with the real rocket. He went back to his cereal boxes. Okay, he said, which was again high commendation. Maya had not looked up from her narration. He should have brought better snacks last time, she said, which was a lie. The croissants had been excellent, but which Nadia recognized as Maya's way of managing the size of something without saying its size out loud. Just like her, Priya always said. Just like her. Nadia put the kettle on. The rain came against the kitchen window in the soft way it did in late October in Vancouver, when the city smelled like cedar and wet stone and the days got narrow and yellow around the edges before dark. She thought about the amber dress still hanging on the back of her bedroom door. She thought about Eleanor Reed's face in the coffee shop, saying I have made enough subtractions. She thought about Eli's hand slipping into hers at the lake, steady and warm and not asking for anything except to be held. She thought about the grey stone with the white stripe, currently sitting on the ledge above Callum's kitchen sink, which he had photographed and sent to her with no message at all, which was somehow the right thing. Nothing had been fixed. That was not the word for it. Fixed implied something that had been broken could be made the same as before. These things could not be made the same. There was 4 years in them. There were 2 children who had grown their own morning habits and their own opinions about croissants and rocket ships, and they were already themselves in ways that had nothing to do with Callum Reid and never would. But there was also Saturday. There was also the Science Centre with the real rocket. There was also the slow and daily business of becoming trustworthy to small people who deserved that above everything. Nadia poured her tea. The tower collapsed. Eli said excellent in the tone of a scientist confirming a hypothesis. Maya said he'd built it wrong on purpose, which he denied, though his expression suggested he had. She laughed in the kitchen of her own making, in the city she had chosen, in the life that had been built from what was actually available and not what had been planned. Outside, the rain continued, and the cedar smell came through the gap in the window, and from the hallway came the sound of cereal boxes being stacked again, beginning once more, which had always seemed to her the most quietly hopeful sound in the world. There's a moment near the end of Nadia's story that I keep coming back to. She's standing in her kitchen at 6:15 in the morning, kettle on, rain against the window, 2 small voices in the next room arguing about cereal boxes. Nothing about it is remarkable. That's exactly the point. But she didn't get a grand reconciliation. She didn't get an apology that erased 4 years. What she got was a Saturday at the park, a man with the wrong jacket and the right croissants, and the slow, unglamorous beginning of something that had to be rebuilt from the ground up. And she chose that, deliberately, with both eyes open. But I think about what it actually took for Nadia to walk into that gala. Not the dress, not the composure, those came after. I mean the decision itself. She'd spent 4 years building a life that worked without Callum Reid in it. She had her clinic, her kids, her downstairs neighbor with infinite patience, and a devoted relationship with telenovelas. She had a system. Showing up meant risking that system. Showing up meant opening a door she'd spent real effort keeping closed. But that kind of courage doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It looks like a woman who said yes to an invitation and then threw away the post-it without answering her own question. But I think that's what real steadiness looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to move anyway, because you know yourself well enough to know what you actually need. But what strikes me about Callum is different. He's not a villain in this story, and that's the harder version. He's a man who let his life become manageable, let other people schedule it, shape it, screen it, and told himself that was maturity. The cost of that didn't come as a single dramatic consequence. It came as 4 years of his children growing without him, as a woman who tried every door he'd unknowingly locked and eventually had to stop knocking. But the choices we make about who gets access to us, that's not a neutral thing, it has weight. Eleanor Reid made her subtractions and called them protection. Callum made his accommodations and called them focus. Neither of them was lying, exactly. That's what makes it matter. But what changes things isn't the revelation at the gala, it's what comes after. It's Callum showing up on Saturday and going across the wobbling bridge because Eli needed to see if he would. It's Nadia holding a boundary clearly and without apology. If you disappear when this becomes inconvenient, I will not explain you twice. It's Eleanor sitting across a table in Kitsilano and saying I have made enough subtractions without reaching for the easier word. But I've been thinking about what it means to earn trust from someone you've hurt, even accidentally, even by absence. It's not a speech, it's not one good morning. It's the grey stone with the white stripe sitting on your kitchen ledge, and the photograph you send without any caption because there's nothing to add, and the croissants chosen carefully for 2 children you're still learning. It's every ordinary Tuesday that says, I'm still here, I meant it. But Maya knew before anyone told her. She kept a book in the closet with a photograph in it. She found the grey stone and approved it. Children understand far more than we protect them from understanding. They just need us to be honest enough to meet them where they are. But that's what I carry from this story. Not that love conquers, not that time heals, but that decency is a practice, not a destination. That integrity means doing the right thing in the Tuesday morning version of the situation, not just the gala version, and that the people who build their lives quietly, without applause in the ordinary hours, they're the ones who tend to end up with something real.